Welcome to Music 320, Week 11, Lesson 4. This is an introduction to the UBC Toolbox. If you haven't downloaded the UBC Toolbox and installed it yet, I recommend you do that before you work through this tutorial. Now, the UBC Toolbox is a collection of modules that can be used for building a complex patch. I should also mention that there are Max MSP modules that you can also use, what are called the beep modules. And if you look on the left side of your window, you'll see the beep menu or the beep icon. And there's a whole list of modules that you can use for analysis effects, MIDI, mixers, all kinds of things, and you can certainly look at those as well. And these are modules that can be brought into Max MSP by simply dragging them and releasing them. So there's a compressor where you have left and right inputs and left and right outputs and controls on compression. So they work in a very similar way to the UBC Toolbox. The UBC Toolbox has some, I would say, some advantages, especially in the ways that you can use the modules, control the modules programmatically. So let's look at a couple of the UBC Toolbox modules and just see how everything operates. So I'm going to do Command N and set up a B patcher. All of the UBC toolboxes are intended to go inside B patchers. And since anything can go in a B patcher and you want to make sure that you put the right thing in the B patcher, the toolbox components that are designed to go in the B patcher will always have a capital B, capital P in their name before the .maxpat. So just when you're looking through trying to find which element to put in, you'll know what to put in. So I'm going to click on the Patcher File Choose button, and I'm going to bring up my window and I'm going to find the location of my documents. So this is my name, Documents, Max 8. Years and years of junk in here. There's my Max 8 folder. Then Library. Inside Library, the UBC Toolbox. Double click on that. And you have different categories of modules, control modules, effects modules, input-output modules, which include panning modules, jitter modules, and players. Control modules are designed to do things like control your patch, matrices, and there's a few other file players and things like that in there. The effects are what you normally think of as audio effects, where audio comes in, is processed, and goes out. Input and output are things like panning, a recorder, a pitch tracker. And jitter modules deal with the jitter, which is the video component of Max MSP. And the players are objects that generate sound. So they're basically synthesizers. So we're going to start by looking at the effects unit. And so when I open this up, I see a whole series of effects. There's a cross synthesizer, which is the internal guts are very similar to what we just looked at in the last video. There's delay units, filters, the biquad filter, a flange, a frequency shifter, ring modulators, vocoders, all kinds of things are in here. So let's start with something really simple like the reverb. And I'm going to use the reverb gen object. And I'm going to open it up, and I see this .maxpat file with the capital B, capital P in it. So that's the one that I want to select for my reverb. to fit inside the B patcher. So I'm going to click open. And there you see that the reverb G, as it's called, has come into the B patcher, and it's got a nice interface to it. And let's open up one more. Let's do the same thing. So a new B patcher. Click on that. Go to choose. Should remember where we are. And let's do the delay. Now you could just as easily make your own digital delay, but we'll use the one that I made. So these are both effects units, and so they're the same color. I'm putting them side by side so that you can see that they have they're very similar in design. They have a control for the input signal going in. They have an on-off switch, so they can be turned on and off. They have a wet-dry mix, so you can control whether or not the effect is actually happening or whether it's only the effect. This is basically a mix between the incoming signal, dry, and the process signal, wet. So if you want a mix of the two, you have it somewhere in the middle. There's also a meter so you can see the levels, and you have some presets, which little write and read buttons so you can read and write presets. Then you have, for each of the objects, you have some dials that control the parameters of the effect unit. And these will vary depending on the effects unit. So for example, this one has a reverb time. That's the time in seconds for the reverb. This is not necessarily how long you will hear the sound after the initial impulse, but it is, it's a value that's used, the standard value for reverb time. So 5 is a fairly long reverb time. A standard room will be in the range of 2 to 3. A cathedral might be 10. A tunnel might be 20 or 15. Then there's actually a setting for the room size. So you're basically trying to recreate an acoustic space by saying the reverb time is quite large because the walls are very reflective, but the room size is quite small. This is in meters. And then there's a reflection value, which controls how much reflection there is off the walls. And then there's a high frequency damping feature, which will control how, when the sound is replicated or delayed, what kind of frequency damping there is. In other words, this kind of represents the amount of absorption that would take place in the walls. In the case of the delay, it's much simpler. You have a delay time in milliseconds and a feedback level. This has got a value of 50, so the range is 0 to 100. The other thing that all of these objects have is an info button. And when you click on the info button, a panel comes up. And this panel basically outlines, it's a help file basically, and talks about all the messages that can be received by the object, right? As well as if there are any arguments or anything like that. So each of these has an info panel which comes up and gives you that information. Okay, so I'm going to turn these two units on and hook them up just so you can see that they do in fact work. I'm going to hook up my incoming signal to the reverb, and you can see that I've got signal coming in there, and I'm going to hook this up. Well, maybe I'll bring my volume down first. Hook it up to the output. So signal out. You'll notice that there are 3 inlets to these objects. One is a signal inlet. The middle one, second one, is a volume control if you don't want to control it with the slider. And the third one is a message to turn them on and off. So you could send a message into the object from outside. I'm going to put my headphones on so I can hear this. And let's listen to my reverberated signal. So you can hear that there's reverberation on this, and I can change the reverb time. So this is even more reverberant. 20-second reverb time. If I move to wet, you will hear even more of the reverberated signal. Of course, you're hearing my voice direct as well, but you can see the difference between the wet signal and the dry signal and the amount of effect that comes in. So if I want something noticeable but not too strong, I might have a reverb time of maybe 4. That gives me a little bit of body to the sound. Okay, so let's go into the digital delay unit. I'm just going to go over here and more or less do the same thing. Turn it on. Give it some volume. Adjust the wet-dry level. And there we go, we have digital delay. So this is basically what we did the other day. So I can, there's also a cycle object button here that I can turn on, and that will do what we were doing when we built the digital delay. It'll sort of move it around from value to value to value. So that can be a fun effect. Now, because these modules are, they're basically dealing with mono signals and passing mono signals in and passing mono signals out, we can take this and we can chain them. So maybe we should put them on top of each other so it's easier to see that. But now we're going to the delay first, and then we're going to the reverb. So we've got a reverberated digital delay. And now I've taken the cycle off. Okay, so and here's just 2 examples of the modules, and you can see how they can be fed into one another. Let's bring in one more module. Do the same thing, B patcher, go to in here, comb filter, ring modulator might be fun. Let's bring the ring modulator in. And we'll resize it. And there's our ring modulator, and let's just set this up so we go to the ring modulator first, out of the ring modulator into the delay, out of the delay into the reverb, right? And we'll give it some volume. We'll turn it on, and we'll get something that's even stranger now, because we'll get a ring modulated signal that is digitally delayed and then reverberated. And I'm going to put the cycle on this one and the cycle on that one, and this is going to be pretty wild. So the sound is being ring modulated and it's being delayed. And I'm going to bring up the delay time a little bit. All right, so that's pretty crazy. I'll move the wet up a little bit. Okay, so I've got a pretty complex series of effects. Pretty complex series of effects going on here. All right, and I'm going to stop this and stop that. So one of the things that with the effects units that I like and maybe differentiates them a little bit from the beep objects that Max provides is that you can programmatically control these objects, because inside these objects, everything that you might want to control has a receive on it. So, for example, I could, I'm going to open up this info box again, the info panel, and all this list of receives that we see. I know it's a bit small to see, but it basically says there's a message called ring mod on off, which takes a 0 or a 1 and turns the unit on or off. Then there's also one ring mod cycle on off, which takes a 0 or a 1. There's a ring mod volume. There's a ring mod volume capital L, which takes a volume and a duration to get to that volume. So that would be basically like a line, and so on. So each of these have these receives, can take messages, and there's some example messages that you can use. So, for example, if I have, for example, a toggle box here, and I send a message which says send ring mod on off, that will turn the ring modulator on and off. So if I have a message such as 100, 2000, I can send that message to ring mod vol capital L. That will be a line value. So that would be essentially taking the ring modulation's volume and moving it to a value of 100 in 2000 milliseconds. So that would be doing that. So I can programmatically send messages to any of these objects from anywhere in my Max patch. And let me turn all of these off. And I'm going to show you a nice little trick in Max that is not really very well documented. And that is the ability to send remote messages to receives anywhere in your patch. And this has nothing to do with the UBC toolbox. This is just something that you can use at any time. You can create a complex message that connects to many different receives. And what you do is you start your message with a semicolon and a return. And then you type the name of the receive. So this would be ring mod on off value of 1. And then you finish the line with a semicolon. And then you say delay, spell it right, delay on off 1. And you say reverb on off 1. Now these are not just random values. These are the receive names that I know because I looked at the info panel and saw that there's a receive called reverb on off, spelt this way with capitals on the O's. And then I could say ring mod vol capital L. Let's go to 100 in 1000 milliseconds. Semicolon. And let's go delay vol capital L to 90 in 1000 milliseconds. And reverb vol L 85 in 1200 milliseconds, just to be different. So this message will basically, one after another in rapid sequence, send the message 1 to the ring mod on off receive. Delay on off will get the message 1. Reverb on off will get the message 1, and so on. And then I'll just duplicate this, and let's just do this. Let's make this 0, 0, and 0 to turn them all off. Now, you must have a semicolon at the beginning of the message, and you must have a semicolon at the end of every line of your message. So I'm going to save that. I haven't given this a name yet. Okay. Watch what happens when I click on this. They all turned on and the volumes all went out. So all those messages were sent, and I'm going to see that it's working. And now I'm going to turn it off, and it all stops. Okay. Now this is not just something that works with the toolbox. This is something that works anywhere with any receive. So if I put in, I'm going to turn this down. I put a message, you know, hey Joe, hi. Then with a semicolon. Then somewhere I have to have a received called hey Joe, and the message hi will get sent to that. Right. So this works anywhere in your patch, and it's a really quick way of doing complex messaging. For example, when you start your patch, I almost always have one of these message boxes with like 40 messages in it, which initialize everything I want in my patch. So let's add in one more. Let's get rid of the ring modulator. Well, let's not get rid of it. Let's just move all this over a little bit. And we'll bring in one more module. We'll choose to go back to Max 8, to our library, to UBC Toolbox, to Effects, and let's use the harmonizer. It's one of my favorites. And let's just, I'm going to repatch this in. So harmonizer goes there, and maybe I'll go to the reverb. We'll just do that. And so give myself some volume here. And you can hear both a delay and a feedback, but also a pitch transposition. And bring it down while I'm talking. But what you hear is that every repetition of your delay is transposed by a certain interval. These are in cents, so 100 for every semitone. So I can, make it go down really rapidly. This is be 4 semitones each repetition. So, and I can make it go up. So this is a really nice device. Not so much with voice, but with instruments, you can do some very wild things with it. Okay, so we've looked at 4 of these. There are more of them. You can wander through and see which ones you think might be interesting. You don't actually need lots and lots of these modules to write an effective piece. You can certainly overdo the effects, as I've been doing in this in the video. But the harmonizer is, I think, it's one of my favorites, because you can take an instrumental sound. I use it with the piano, and it makes the piano go out of tune, as each repetition is very slightly transposed up or transposed down. In fact, you can have 2 of them and transpose in both directions at the same time, which is a nice effect. So that's an introduction just to the effects units. I think the important things are that these objects are similar in design. They have the same inputs and outputs. You can daisy chain them together. You can set them up in parallel, and you can control them remotely. So everything that you have in these patches could be controlled. Again, I have to know what it is. So I'm just going to quickly look in here and say, how do I turn that cycle on? Well, there's a harm cycle on off, spelled just like that. So if I have a message box, put a semicolon and put harm cycle on off 1 and click on it, this turns on and the values start moving. Okay? So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to put a bunch of these effects together, and we're going to use the matrix object to try to control the path of the signal. Because as you can imagine, it's not going to work particularly well if I have to decide ahead of time how all these modules are, what order they're connected to one another. I might just want the ring modulator by itself, and I might want the ring modulator going into the reverb, or the ring modulator going into the delay, but not the reverb. So I want a way that I can manage that. So we'll look at that in the next tutorial. Thank you.